Hey guys, Dimensional Sight here, back with another video. And today we are going to be looking at Mount Everest in the Himalayan mountains. And as we know, the legends of the Himalayas are that there are gods living in them, and there's just all sorts of activity supposedly happening in them. And we've looked at Mount Meru in my past video, Mount Meru, India. We've also looked at Mount Kailash. And I have to say, there seems to be a lot going on in the Himalayas. And so the first thing I would like to talk about with the Himalayan mountains, or with Mount Everest here, is some of the structural elements that I'm seeing in this picture. Um, The first thing that I saw when I started looking at this picture was I was just starting to look up close here, and I just noticed like all these lines coming down right here, and they all seem to be kind of at the similar length and also similar width to one another. So I thought that was interesting. And so I was just kind of looking at it, and the thing that I thought was really strange about this particular area was when you come over here and you can see the sunlight is hitting the ground, but it looks like a rug is sitting on top of this dirt here, or some kind of a surface. It's a very abrupt transition between the two, and it just looks really interesting right here in this spot. And just the way these lines come down very straight is just looking really structural to me. So I'm feeling like this is definitely giving us a clue here of what this might have been at one time. I think this over here gives us another big clue. The way that these triangular formations are, they just look like the way that houses would look. Obviously, at this point, totally destroyed. This whole site, if it was once a giant building, which is what I believe it was, um, then these would have been level and upright, and now they've been crashed down to the ground, and you know. But we're still seeing evidence of them. And then if you go over to the left of those on the image, you can see some more of the triangular angles over here. And then there used to, this one's much more, this side much more destroyed, but I believe these two sides may have been symmetrical with one another at one point in time. Um, and what you had is these triangles getting bigger as they go back. And I think there were at least 3 triangles, because you've got this one and then 2, and then I believe there's a third one right here. And I believe this one would have matched up with this one. The second one here would have matched up with this one. And then there would have been a larger third one, which is totally destroyed. That's what that kind of looks like to me. In my previous videos about Mount Meru, I had talked about these very stringy looking formations all over the top of the mountain, and I've got some pretty interesting images to look at in that regard on here. It's also interesting to me how it looks like it's layered, like where the stringy things run down. It's like there's an abrupt transition between it and the layer below it that it's laying on top of. obviously all petrified at this point. At one point in time, you know, it was another material, not stone. And I've got a really good image of these. Well, I'm going to come right out and tell you what I think this looks like. I think that these were like tassels at one time, very obviously in human terms, very large tassels. But and I'm trying to figure out what the heck they were doing with these tassels. Haven't quite gotten to the bottom of that yet, but the way that it looks like is that there were just hundreds or thousands of these tassels hanging down for some reason. I mean, you can clearly see in this image right here what we're looking at. So you got the way that they, you know, each of the strings kind of is wrapping around here, frozen in time, you know. These ones have the kind of line across here. I think that's just maybe something that was tied around the tassel. I don't know. But that's definitely what that looks like to me. And they all have just like a similar length. Like you can see. So when you see the bottoms of all the tassels down here, it's like they were all bundled together. And then you can see them. They're all like the same length. You know, and up here they're kind of like laying on their side and they're buried under all this snow and they're all sideways near the peak. So I have no idea what these tassels were doing. Like, were they hanging from a ceiling? And this is would and originally this would have these tassels would have been inside the building and covered from the elements, or were these tassels hanging from the roof, like as a form of shingle on the outside? I don't know. It's very strange. I was just trying to figure out what the heck they were doing with those. Um, Over here, you can see some more of this triangular housing looking. Um, it's like the tip of a roof right there, tip of a roof right there. There's an actual buried tip of a roof that you can see back over here. I believe if we zoom in, we can start to see the peaks of what looked like were once also. Yeah, right here. That to me looks very much like the tip of a roof right there. That's buried. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's just so many structural elements to this mountain that I'm seeing. I'm very much putting it in with Mount Meru, India. They both are just looking very similar to one another to me. Right here, you've got this break line in the back. That would be a level. Here we've got another one, but that one's been shifted sideways. It's no longer level. At one point in time, this was level. Okay, so the next thing we'll look at is right down in this area, some more structural elements is what I'm going to call it. Right here. So you've got this shelf. It's like this very straight line surface, and then below it, where the shadows are located, you've got this very square looking block on the wall. And then I don't quite see the line coming down for a second square here, but I just thought that was oddly square shaped right there. And then we'll come back to this area because there's some more going on in this image that's very interesting. You might already see it. Next, we're going to look at something that's really interesting. It relates to Mount Meru, India, and it's over here. And when we zoom in on this location, anybody that watched my Mount Meru, India video might recognize already what we're looking at here. I'm going to go ahead and oscillate this for everyone just to give you an idea. Now the funny thing on this one is that look at the square shaped block. Okay, right there. Like that's just that's actually what drew my eye to this particular location, was that very right angle-ish look to it, and going into the mountainside. And then when I zoomed in, I mean, I just was like, whoa, there is a dragon head right there, like a dragon head entrance, just like in the Mount Meru, India, except I'm not seeing a 3-in-1 or multi-dimensional this time. I'm only seeing the dragon head on this one. So I'm going to bring that image up for you guys to compare it. So this was Mount Meru, India right here, and that dragon head entrance was right here, if you remember that. And so right here you've got what looks like a dragon's head, and with its mouth open, and then I'm theorizing that this is a cave of some sort or an entrance of some sort. But let's go ahead and compare that to this right here. So you can really see the dragons were real, and they have these like their lips and everything. They have all this stuff like hanging off their mouths, basically, like all this like just different, you know, and that's just what you're seeing on this one as well. But they both have their mouths open, and then you go in, is what it looks like to me. So very interesting image right there that I found at Mount Everest. I was also kind of seeing the image of like a Medusa head back here too, but not so sure about that one. It's kind of a just something that kind of caught my eye up there. But yeah, this dragon head cave entrance right here is really stunning. Uh, so we're going to start looking at some anomalies on this image now. The first one I'll show you. Yeah, let's go to, we're going to go back to that location we were looking at originally, which was right here where we saw that square-shaped block. And when you zoom in on this one, it's really interesting. Right here, that it looks like a guy standing there holding a staff, and he looks like he has like a wizard hat on, or like a pajamas hat type look. And you can clearly see the light hitting him, and him, you know, casting the shadow in all the right directions. Uh, I mean, there is definitely what looks to be a guy standing there. And to a human, this would, you know, this guy would be enormous in size if a human was up there. Okay, and then also in this image, you know, you'll see some other things actually. Over here, I'm seeing something else, what looks like an entity of some sort. And actually, you'll see a bunch more in this if you really stare at this one. But this one's pretty clear to me. This guy right here. I'm gonna actually oscillate that one for you, just because this one's really good. So the next one that we are gonna look at is, I noticed down, let's see here. Yeah, right down here, you got where the snow and the rubble comes down into this pile, and it's piled over what looks like this rock that's exposed, but sort of halfway buried. But the tip of the rock, I suppose, is still sticking out. But the more I looked at it, it just doesn't really look like. It just seems kind of far-fetched that this is in fact rock sticking out in that way, just because of the way everything's falling down around it. Um, it just doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. I was feeling like this is something that's sitting on top of this rubble pile. That's what this is looking like to me. Am I saying this is some kind of a craft? I don't know. You be the judge, but it looks like it has this coming out this way and this coming down this way in a very symmetrical way, and then this kind of in the middle. And then it has, if it were a craft cloaking itself as, the rock, making itself just appear like it's rock, the same color as the rock, just camouflaged. So I thought that was interesting. Um, and then the only other real anomaly that I felt like was worth looking at on this image. Let's see, where was this guy? Hmm, where the heck was this guy? Yeah, you know what? We'll skip that one. It wasn't that great or anything. Huh. So weird. I just can't remember. Oh, right here. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Right here, there's what looks like a guy. So right here, and what I'm seeing is a guy holding a staff, and then there's like a cat or a pet behind him. He has kind of a cartoonish look to him as well, which I do see that quite a bit in these images. Is they sometimes have this almost anime or like almost like a Pokemon type of look. And I'll be doing another video about why I think that is and what's going on with it. Why do you see the images the way that you do, and what's that all about? And it should be very interesting. So stay tuned for my new videos. We're going to talk about what dimensional sight really is and why you need to be careful when you're engaging in these types of activities. But what I see is I see this guy right here. Here's his hair, here's his face, here's his body, and then here's his little cat or dog. It looks like a cat to me. And then on top of his staff, what I'm seeing is like a translucent head. So it's almost like his staff projects this image up. And I've seen this type of thing in another image as well, but I haven't quite figured out. It maybe is a cloaking mechanism. One of my ideas was that part of the way they hide themselves is they put faces everywhere. There are like multi faces pointing in different directions and things, and at different locations on their body. Like they might wear what looks like another head on top of their head, like as a hat, or they'll wear it on their chest. And what it does is it actually tricks the human brain into not seeing anything at all. Basically, all the faces act as a form of camouflage. This is just a theory I've been working on because I just keep seeing the same things over and over, the same techniques, and so it's starting to add up as to like what's going on with it. Um, and so I'm gonna move to another image of Mount Everest at this point. So we're gonna move over to this image, taken from a different angle. I don't know what side is what. So, all right, let's see. Let's close this one. And we'll, oh shoot. Okay, guys, I goofed. I had it open at one point. Let's just reopen it from here. Yeah, this software is pretty bad. I do apologize. Okay, so we're going to look at this image right here of Mount Everest. And so again, just what I'll call these tassels, near the top. And you come over here and it starts to look like lines of tassels. So I'm still just not quite sure what that all means. Um, on this one, we're just going to start with looking at structural elements as well. And so I found this very interesting. We've got clouds in the way. Down in the low, by the way, all these images were pulled off the internet, so there is the potential they have been tampered with, just so you know. Um, this cloud down here in the lower left just is very strange looking to me just because it's very round in its shape. And so I found that odd. And when I zoomed in down here, I find what's going on down here to be very interesting, uh, very structural looking as each of these beams or whatever comes down. But then you've got these like columns and dome looking. Uh, it's the only thing I can think of when I see these. It's just very interesting looking. And I mean, did somebody put this cloud here to hide this? Has this been photoshopped? I don't know. I mean, it looks like it's shadowed correctly, but are they trying to hide something? Because you go down here and then you see the other side. It's very weird. There's like they're rounded. Each line that goes down is rounded off at the bottom, and then there's a dot. So I don't know what's going on down there. It looks very structural to me. Is something there currently? And there's this like image of a almost like a baby or something that's floating. It's really, really bizarre how that's shaped. It's not. I mean, how could natural rock form into this in this way? And then also, I mean, you've got the evidence of peaks, A-frame housing. Um, Not as much from this side. I think we're on like the back side of the mountain, the other side from where the other picture was showing us. When we zoom in down here, we can see this crack line or this level line. And the next thing that I noticed on here was regarding an image of some type of mud fossil, potentially Titan mud fossils here. So where I found that is when I was looking right here in this location. I'm seeing some pretty weird stuff right here. So let's get kind of zoomed in on it a little. And then I'm going to move some of these bars around so we can get kind of a good look at what's going on here. So what I am seeing right here on the mountainside is the image of a woman right here and another child right here. And I do believe, I'm going to turn up some, let's get, sorry, I need to make this look better. I think this looks pretty good right here. Okay. So what I'm seeing is a woman right here. She's got a head covering on that's kind of wrapped around her cheek right here. There's a hand or two hands on top of her head. I believe she might possibly be putting her hand up on her own head. She has like a look of agony on her face. And I'm seeing what I believe to be her child next to her, to the left of her right here. And you can quite clearly make out the faces. Here would be her nose, her eye, her mouth. And then down here, the child's eyes, nose, mouth. Here's his cheek over here. Here's his ear. Sorry, that's not a very good look. But yeah, that looks a lot like what I theorize would be have been the original inhabitants of the location, or people that were inside the buildings as they were destroyed. And these hands that come down on the head, um, it looks like more than one. So I think she's maybe got her hand up on her head, but I also think there's maybe another face over here. So this may have been a guy, and he had his hand up over on her as well, maybe trying to protect. He maybe was also covering with his other hand this child's head. This is, potentially the father, or, who knows. Okay. And then I also found something kind of interesting looking right up here. This one, if you zoom in, the snow itself is covering this particular image. It's all white, so I guess we're supposed to just think this is the normal snow coming down, but it really forms the face of some kind of a creature, whether it be a snake head or almost like a cougar head, or um, a thundercat. you know, is it like a thundercat's face right there? But it's just got these ridges that are very symmetrical, and then these eyes. I mean, I see the eye there, and then I see what looks like to be another eye, I'm assuming, on the other side. And then the mouth here, very squared off nose. Um, and then let's see, we've got a whole bunch of anomalies on this image right here. Um, let's see. The first anomaly we'll look at, I noticed, was down here. I was just kind of looking in this area, and I noticed that there was like a shadow right here because the direction of the sun is going in this direction. You can verify that with all the other parts of the picture. And so I noticed there was like what looked like a shadow being cast right here, and then I think what we're seeing is a guy standing here. And then I also perceived what I thought was a smaller doorway right here in the mountainside, or just like a door. And but he would be too big to go into that door. It's hard to make this guy out though. I looked at him for a while, and he's kind of hard to define. Fairly well blended in with the mountainside right there. But his shadow gives him away. That's definitely one of the techniques that I use a lot, is the use of the shadows, because the shadows don't lie. And the next one that we'll look at is I found over here. Let's see. Yeah, it's gonna be right here. So the first thing I noticed was there was these very right angle looking spots. So I mean, this looked like almost like a structural element right there because of the right angle of that. And then I noticed this had a very square shape. This where this snow is sitting, and then just above it, what looks like a face sticking out of the wall right there. And I'll go ahead and oscillate this one for you. Let's see, we'll keep the brightness up. Let's go ahead and do, I think, contrast, maybe a good one. But yeah, he kind of looks like yeah, he's got this like square base with a face sticking out, and then potentially like a walkway going this way in front of the face. And then while I was looking at that, down below that, I noticed some really strange looking things. Um, just below that area, actually, right down here, you see the face of a guy. He looks like he's wearing like a crown. Uh, has kind of an authoritative look to him. Here's his face, his nose, his eye. Think he has a beard. Potentially, this is his arm coming down, and he's holding a staff. And then I've got a kind of disturbing image right next to him, what looks like a guy hanging from the cliffside. It looks to me like his arms are up in the air behind him, and he would be tied up basically and being hung off the mountainside. And then you see, like, it's such a weird image, but the guy, there's his head, there are his arms, and there's his body, and there's his legs, and there's his feet, and it's like he's got it's like it almost looks like a guy who's got like a t-shirt and pants and tennis shoes on. Very strange. Really strange image on the mountainside here with this king staff guy hanging down. And then there's other anomalies you start to notice around this as well. So that is a really interesting spot right there. And you can even see this panel or whatever it was with that 90-degree angle is actually in front of where that guy is hanging from. He's actually like behind it on the mountainside. Okay, and So the next thing to look at is also pretty interesting. Um, if we go over this way, I was noticing the very cube-looking shape of this object right here on the mountain. It had a very sort of structural look to me, so I was kind of zooming in on it, and I just started seeing some really weird things over here. Um, the first thing I noticed was it just looked like there was this guy sitting on the cliffside here, but he's kind of like black. Um, he's like wearing all black, and he has black skin, it looks like, or maybe if he were a statue, I don't know, maybe it would be a black statue. Um, and then behind him, it looks like directly behind him is a cross, and this looks like a cross to me. Um, and it would be kind of like that fancy type of cross that has like the flare on it, you know. But it very much looks like one. And then behind that cross, it looks like there's like maybe an entity or a guy there. This is potentially some kind of an opening. Instead of this just being shadowed, this maybe goes in. Because if you zoom in behind it, then there looks like there's a guy back here. Um, here's his eyes, nose, mouth, chin. He's maybe holding a staff as well. He potentially has like an elven shaped ear or something. But yeah, I thought that was really. And then there's actually more. This is another spot where there's a lot going on, and you start to see more the more you kind of just sit here and look at it. But a lot of it's hard to make out. Yeah, there are maybe a couple other faces. You do start to see faces popping out, which is a big theme with like one's right here. This looks like a face, and there's more. Let me know in the comments if you see something I didn't catch here. But yeah, this clearly looks like a standalone structure right there. Uh, and just the very, like I said, the it was the first thing that drew my eye to it was just the very block-like nature of what I was seeing. And so once I zoomed in and oscillated, some of the exposures, that's when you really start to see everything. I mean, that's a fairly well-defined face right there. Okay. Um, and then the other thing that I thought was interesting too was up here near the peak. I just found it like, you've got all the what I'll call tassels coming down everywhere. And then you've just got this one strip of just this very long kind of, it gets wider as it goes down, but it looks very flat. And I zoomed in on it. So again, just kind of had this symmetry, and um, it looks like there's this kind of rectangular building right here or something. It's definitely interesting looking. My original idea was that if there were craft, maybe this is a takeoff and landing point that they would use, and this kind of being their runway up into the sky. That was just an idea I had. But yeah, that's covered in snow right there, but very kind of has that very structural look to it. And then as you go down from that, then there's this other thing covered in snow right here. And the only other anomalies I'll show you on this image that I noticed was over here when you come to the clouds. Just a couple little cloud guys. Kind of reminded me of the guy in the waterfall. If you see my waterfall and rainbow video, there's a guy standing, an entity, and he's pretty clear as day standing there. And this guy kind of reminds me of that. And he looks like he kind of has this little hat on, but like here would be his nose and his eyes and his mouth right here, and he's, there's his neck and there's his body, and he's basically standing there in the cloud. And and then the other one was this guy over here, which kind of looks like here, maybe here's his head and here's his arm and here's his hand. Um, and then on the back of this image, if you play around with these, I just was getting some funny. I thought this was interesting back here. There's something interesting going on back in this location as well. I thought uh, it's a little blurry. It's hard to tell what's going on back there, but I thought this was kind of interesting. The way there's like a crack in the snow right here. Not really sure what's going on with that. I was kind of getting this dimensional image right here of like a woman standing here with like the elongated skull hat on. But then there's like multi faces that you can see in it. It's almost like a totem of faces going up. One of those images where you see like hats on hats. Um, this woman almost kind of looks like the Chiquita banana woman. There's an angry face kind of woman here, and then like this would be her hat of the Chiquita banana woman. So it's just getting like a weird image there. And the last picture of Mount Everest that we'll look at today is no, not this one. This one, the only reason I had it up was because I was showing the prayer flags, and that was what was kind of reminding me of the uh, tassels, because there's certain spots where it almost looked like a prayer flag, like the rope was going down, and then you could see the prayer flags hanging. So that was the only reason I had that one open. But then there was also this last image here, and this one, the only thing I wanted to talk about is just the really interesting. Let me close this one so we can open the other one for editing. Um, yeah, this one right here. So the thing that I noticed here is I was like, what in the world? This is, I think, proves that this was structural at one point. Um, Let me try to get this lighting right for us so that we can really see what I'm talking about. So right here would be the top of the rectangles, and then right here would be the bottom of it, and you can see the line. And just look at these rectangles, perfectly shaped, the same size, all connected together in a line. Obviously melted at this point, but we can see the evidence of what once was. Clearly built, not natural, not naturally forming in any way. I don't see how the formation, if supposedly mountains were created by um, accident, how in the world you could ever get this happening. Um, and you can see that it just keeps going along this line right here and along, and then you can start to make out all the lines that all went down. A lot of it's been melted, but You can still see what was once was. And then directly above it, all of a sudden you see the horizontal instead of vertical lines. And then it's just horizontal layers, thin horizontal layers going all the way up to the top. And when I look at these horizontal layers, I mean, you've got a seam line, and you can see it. It's lighter colored than the rest of the rock. Down here's a good example. So at one time, these seam line. Now here's a really good example of the seam line coming along right here. So at one time, all these seam lines were level to the ground, but after the destruction occurred, everything's all melted and messed up, and off center and off kilter, and um, but to me, this really reminds me of like a 3D printing process, or like Wise Up talks about on YouTube. He talks about concrete, how the ancients used the concrete, a lot and they poured it in levels, and then you would let the level dry, and then you pour the next level, and then you let it dry, and you pour the next level. But I believe that potentially didn't even have to do that much work. It was more like um, a Vimana or some sort of giant machine would 3D print these structures. And there may have been a time of drying where they had to wait and then do the next, but they were very advanced to be able to build. I mean, just the scale of these, what once was. And then the only other part of this image here that kind of stuck out to me was, as far as structural goes, is I was kind of getting the feeling of a sphinx-like structure being here at one time. This would have been in one of its paws, and then this over here would have been its other paw, and then this has been buried and destroyed and melted and everything. The other paw, that's why we can't see it. And then that would kind of make sense for this thing that I was seeing with the long vertical rectangles, would have kind of been like its armor that it wears. So like at the bottom of the Sphinx structure, near its paws, you would have had like its coat. See, so it would have been wearing like a coat of arms, and this would have been like the bottom of the coat of arms, as it, that would have gone around its body. So that's all I got for you today, guys. Those are my thoughts on Mount Everest for now. The Himalayas are just very interesting, and I'm sure I'll be doing more videos on mountains in the Himalayas. My next couple videos are probably going to be a little bit different, so stay tuned, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye.